Welcome back to Close Up. Chris Agers' move to NHGOP chairman freed up a spot on the Republican National Committee. And the replacement is a familiar face joining us once again on Close Up, former New Hampshire House Speaker Bill O'Brien. Mr. Speaker, thanks for being here.
Well, I appreciate you having me, Adam.
So this is one of the most interesting and powerful jobs in New Hampshire politics, and it happens almost entirely behind closed doors, behind the scenes, and out of state. So what's mission number one as you see it joining the
mission
RNC?
number one is going to have to be protecting the First in the Nation primary. Juliana Bergeron is the National Committee woman for the Republican Party out of New Hampshire. She's done a great job in solidifying for the Republicans the First in the Nation primary slot for 2024. So now we're going to start looking at 2028 and make sure that this tradition that's now going on to over 100 years continues.
Yeah, the work never ends, really. And you mentioned 2028, you start planting those seeds now. Does it make your job any easier, making that case with the RNC, that the Democrats have kind of snubbed New Hampshire? Or, because we know those forces that are within the DNC, they exist in the RNC too, that want to take this away? Well,
I think it's unfortunate that President Biden and the National Democrats have shown such disrespect to the process and disrespect to New Hampshire. We hope to work with local Democrats, state Democrats, to return the Democrat primary to New Hampshire as part of the First in the Nation process. There will be a Democrat primary. At the time there was a Republican primary. There will be Democrat candidates, and they have to choose on the national level whether they're going to respect the choice of Democrat voters this January when the primary occurs. But we hope very much that this will be in New Hampshire a bipartisan effort to protect this really important process.
And this really did used to be more of a joint endeavor, Republicans and Democrats working together to defend the primary. That's broken down a little bit, but from what I hear you saying, if you can help Democrats, you will.
Sure, and I understand in the legislature there's a constitutional amendment, a New Hampshire constitutional amendment working its way forward. I think there's going to be bipartisan support of that. That's one that would enshrine in our Constitution what we have in statute now, which is we're going to have the First in the Nation presidential primary.
Mm-hmm. There's so much that's potentially different about 2024 and defending the primary. Aside from that defense, you have a former president who's running, and that's unique. But also, there's the potential that Governor Chris Sununu could run. Does it make it harder to defend the primary at all if you have a possible sort of quote-unquote favorite son candidate running?
I don't think so, because we have such a tradition of being so opening to the presidential candidates come here. They know that when they're dealing with the New Hampshire Republican Party, that we're going to not wait in favor of one candidate over another. Chris Agers, the party chair, myself as the national committeeman, really the whole executive committee are going to make sure that this is an opening, welcoming environment. Our efforts are going to be twofold over the next year. That's to have a primary that is fair to every candidate who signs up for it, and then prepare the ground for a Republican victory in November 2024.
Do you think with the Democrats backing away here and potentially, even if President Biden runs for re-election, he might not come here at all, which isn't unheard of if somebody's running for re-election as president, but that sort of distancing from the Granite State, do you expect that the Republicans can make gains through their own primary with undecided voters, independents, those people?
Well, I think voters are very disappointed when they watch what's going on in the Democratic Party and a national level in many different areas. Certainly they're concerned about the First in the Nation primary. It's giving New Hampshire a unique voice in national politics, and we lose a lot if we lose that. The Democratic Party here in the state would lose quite a bit if they're not part of the process. I'm confident they'll work with us to protect this tradition. There's been great efforts by Democrats in the past to promote the First in the Nation primary, and I think we're going to see in the legislature that both parties are going to come together to do that.
A new AP poll has President Biden at 38% approval nationally. It would seem the stage is set for Republican victories in 2024. But then we look back at what happened in 2022. A lot of people were saying the same thing. The stage is set for Republican victories, and they didn't materialize. How do you prevent history from repeating itself just 2 years later?
You have to have a relevant conversation with the voters. You have to understand what their concerns are and be upfront and honest with them. We look at what's going on in politics now, and I think Governor Huckabee of Arkansas stated it well. It's not so much what the Republican Party is doing, what the Democrat Party is doing, what the left is doing, what the right is doing. It's normal versus crazy. And so we have to get across to the voter that what they're hearing on the national level, all this demonization and insults and just absurd policies, has to be rejected. So I think we're going to have a great conversation. We have to get that across to the voters. We have to sensitize them to the insults, sensitize them to things they're not hearing. The Hunter Biden laptop, for example, which the media tended to ignore. Last presidential election. We have to get these across to them, and I think it will be a great election. It should be. We have to return to a strong America. We have to return to a stable America. We have to deal with the inflation that fantastic overspending by the Democrats has produced the inflation. It produced bank crisis as the Fed is raising rates and trying to deal with the inflation. I think people should and will return to the Republican Party.
This, sort of public distaste for hyper-partisanship. If we rewound the clock a decade, some might argue that you were among the more, muscular pressers of advantage for the Republican Party and things like that. Has your perspective changed at all, given how the electorate has responded, or still the same Bill O'Brien, do you think?
Well, we achieved some great things when I was Speaker, and I'm still very proud of them. And one of the things that I think, I was viewed as being highly partisan, but one of the things you have to follow is we didn't engage in insults. We didn't call people names. To state your political philosophy forcefully is a great part of the process. To look at the other side and say, I'm not going to deal with you on a policy basis or philosophy basis, I'm just going to call you names. That's something that is to be avoided, and we've seen more and more of that, and that's the drama I think that people want to turn from.
You've been trying to keep the GOP a big tent party through your right of center meetings. I'm interested for your perspective on how you win the argument with America's youth, because polls have shown that they are trending leftward at a disproportionate rate. So how do you think you win over young people in the long run?
By connecting with them to things that they're interested in. They're very interested in having their individual perspectives honored and understood, and that's something that we as Republicans can do very well. We don't have collective big government solutions. We have solutions that understand what people are seeking in their lives, that assume people want the freedom to move forward. They don't want government standing in their way. And I'm convinced that young people will turn to that. We certainly see it happening now as young people increasingly come into the Republican Party. We see it in other groups such as Hispanics and the African American community turning more and more to the Republican Party, saying these big government solutions, this demonization of others who don't belong to the proper victim group, that's not working for us anymore. And I believe along with those groups will come the young people.
And certainly we're in a period of political upheaval and perhaps some realignment within the parties. When it comes to that younger generation, though, they're not out in the streets like the French protesting, calling for more government help, but it feels like maybe they could be with the situations they've faced, crippling debt just to attend college, home ownership almost completely out of reach for them, jobs that they get may not pay them enough to make ends meet. How do you make sure or ensure that they, would trend in your direction when the market hasn't worked for them, when no government help hasn't worked for them?
Well, you just made the point. When no government help has worked for them, the government won't work for them. As Ronald Reagan said, the worst thing that you can hear from the government is, we're here to help you. I think President Trump, for example, in his policies, understood that if government can back off, then the economy will flourish. And I think we have to connect with young people on that basis. Giving people, for example, debt relief for tuition is just going to increase the cost of tuition. It's going to produce more of this. Government has to back off and stop looking for big solutions and do what we've done so well in New Hampshire, allow the private economy to bring us prosperity. At one point I went and talked up in Maine to some conservatives up there, and I contrasted the way Maine is operated over the the last 40 or 50 years in the way New Hampshire has operated. We have so much. We started off as very much the same state. You know, same demographics, same income levels. We in New Hampshire promoted freedom solutions. There they had big government solutions, and now our per capita income is 15 to 20% more than in Maine. Our graduation rate for kids going getting out of kids who have been in high school is much higher than Maine. In the long run, and this is the argument we have to make to young people, that if you turn to market solutions, to freedom solutions, in the end, that will give you much more of the prosperity you're looking for.
All right. Newly installed RNC Committeeman Bill O'Brien, thanks for joining us on Close Up.
I appreciate it, Adam. Thank you very much.